Hi everybody, it's Jaraan Onai, bringing you pointers for progress in your spiritual awakening, with a reminder that while knowledge may be power, understanding is mastery. Let's explore. One of the things I was thinking about this morning was a quote from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's how I started my spiritual journey. I think my soul planned it very well. Go through what I did, take me the alcoholism route to find AA and spiritual. It really is a program of spiritual awakening, not just recovery. But it's a topic for another time, perhaps. If you're interested, put a question in the comment or whatever. I'll be glad to discuss more about that. But the quote is in the appendix. Can't remember which one. I think it's appendix 2 on the spiritual experience. And the quote says, "There is a principle which is a bar against all information and proof against all arguments, and cannot fail to keep," they say a man, but because it's an old quote, "cannot fail to keep a person in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation." And that's probably one of the more significant teachings on the spiritual path. If we have contempt prior to investigation, in other words, we just assume things are the way they are and don't bother to question it, or we judge things without exploring further, we're probably going to miss something. And using that particular quote and bearing that in mind as I continued on my journey, it really, really encouraged exploration. It encouraged me to question everything, to really explore and endeavor to understand, what's really going on here. Because a lot of times we think we know when we really don't. And, some people might find that comment shocking. It's like, well, I'm really sure. It's like, I've got all this evidence. My whole history proves blah, blah, blah. Well, I can say that too. And when you understand how consciousness really works, and that our experience of reality is really based on this conglomerate of belief constructs that we have in our subconscious, then all that's really proven is that we have beliefs that lead to whatever experience we're having. And sometimes those experiences are not directly a manifestation, but indirectly a manifestation of those beliefs. I can talk more about that at some point too, if you're interested. But the thing is, if we're not even willing to question our own beliefs, question our own interpretation of our experiences, then we may be, missing the mark. We may be missing something that's important. And especially if those interpretations are negative, judgmental in some way. If they provoke anger or fear, it's really a good idea to take a look at, what belief is associated with this feeling, right? Because that's what it is. It's not what they said, it's what you heard. It's not what they did, it's what you saw. And technically, it's really what you interpreted. It's how you interpret the input that you receive from your environment. And I think a lot of times we struggle because we're basing our actions, technically reactions, on our conditioning, which isn't 100% accurate. And if it isn't, then whatever reaction we have to a stimuli is just going to create more stuff to deal with. But whenever we can see it truly, we can see it from our heart, we see it from our soul's perspective, from an objective perspective, then that changes not only how we see things, but how we respond to them, and tends to make it considerably more effective, our response. So, yeah, I want to really encourage you. It's like whatever you're dealing with, because everybody's dealing with something. It's like, okay, what am I really seeing here? What's really going on here? My first mentor, Katie, she was fond of pointing out to me, it's like every time you point one finger at somebody else, you got three fingers pointing back at you. And of course, that alludes to the whole mirroring, the as within, so without. And that's also a really handy concept to keep in mind as you're going about your life experience, whatever the situation, whoever you're dealing with, whatever the circumstance. It's like if I'm reacting to something, that same thing's probably in me. It's just hidden. Especially if I'm complaining about it a lot. Same thing's probably in me. I haven't seen it yet. And the surest way to resolve those kinds of issues is to identify whatever belief you're carrying that corresponds to it. And the surest way to identify that belief is, be present with the emotion. If you have a negative emotion coming up, I'm judging this, or I'm mad about that, or frustrated, or disappointed, or whatever the case might be. Okay, so what's the feeling associated with that? Get clear about that, and then what's the belief associated with it? And identify and resolve that belief. And resolving beliefs doesn't have to be complicated. There are specific steps you can take. I actually wrote a journaling book that will walk you through the steps, exactly what to do in order to dismantle these beliefs. But, the short version is just see the bigger picture, see it for what it is, not for whatever you have believed that it is, right? Because there's always more than one perspective. I'm reminded of this book I read several years ago. Actually, I read it 2 or 3 times, called A Stranger in a Strange Land. And I can't remember the dude's name right now, sci-fi writer. But anyway, in it, one of the main characters is asking an employee, it's like, what color is that house? And her response is, well, on this side, it's whatever it was, white with brick or whatever. And that made quite an impression. And the author, through that character, went on to explain, it's like, okay, if you haven't seen the entire house, then you don't actually know. We will assume, as a general rule, you assume that if you see one side of a house and it's, white siding, then you assume that's all the way around the house. But until you actually see all 4 sides of the house, you don't actually know that. And so you can't say for sure. Well, spirituality, spiritual growth, circumstances we deal with, same kind of thing. It's like if we don't see all sides of it, then we can't say for sure that that's what it is. And especially in spiritual growth and awakening, it pays well to look at all sides. And there may be way more than 4. But there's no harm in exercising some emotional intelligence, some spiritual intelligence, and looking at things from different perspectives. It's handy to be able to see things from multiple perspectives. I know there seems to be in mass consciousness this assumption that certainty is confidence and that confidence is truth. But that's really not the case. I've definitely interacted with people who were 100% confident in what they were saying, and they were 100% inaccurate from my point of view. And then they were the ones that were in conflict, and then got in more conflict when I didn't just automatically agree and validate their perspective. But I couldn't, because I could see multiple sides of things. The advantage of being able to see multiple sides of things is that you're not stuck in some negative perspective. And that's one of the keys, really, to spiritual growth. If you want to recover, you want to heal, you want to transform your life, you want to transform your brain, how it works, then it's worthwhile to exercise your perspective taking. It's like, look at all these different facets, look at all the different ways it could be. because nothing is the way it is. It's just one way it could be, and the way we see things is not just the way it is. It's one way it could be, from that perspective. And, this isn't to get into a debate of right and wrong. It's really more about helping to open up our minds so that we can see more of the reality and don't stay stuck in the illusion. Otherwise, that's what we're doing. If we're committed to some negative perspective, we're basically just perpetuating our own illusions and our own misery as a consequence of that. Well, that's not no fun. So, be willing to see things from multiple perspectives. If only to free yourself from a negative perspective. When I first started out, especially when I was identifying negative beliefs, I would try to see how the opposite was also true. And maybe it wasn't the most true, or it may not even have been my truth, but at least it was another option that wasn't so debilitating, that didn't hold me back so much, that didn't keep me stuck in some negative frame of reference, some negative state of mind. And that's really handy. It's this nitty-gritty kind of stuff that really helps us progress. It's not the big fancy stuff. That's why I call this series No Flash Brilliance, because it's like nothing fancy about it. It's not about looks, it's about function. And so, if we want to function effectively as evolving souls, then exercising emotional intelligence, exercising mindfulness, exercising spiritual intelligence is 100% absolutely a part of the path. And the effort is absolutely worth it, because if you want to be at peace, then you can't be tangled up in strong negative reactions to false beliefs. It's kind of funny when you think about it and you get on the other side of it. It's hilarious how much time and energy we spend all wrapped up in stuff that turns out not to even be true. Okay? And that's not saying to deny your experience. I'm not talking about that, because it's like if stuff happened and it hurt, it hurt. That's real. That's absolutely real. And the beliefs that may have developed as a consequence of that experience may not be real. And so it's a good idea, it's really important actually, to identify those beliefs. Because when we have, especially self-beliefs, beliefs about ourselves that aren't true, they keep us from aligning with the divine. They keep us from aligning with source consciousness or infinite love, or pick the word that works for you, because they're not compatible. A negative belief isn't compatible with oneness consciousness. Negative attitude isn't compatible with oneness consciousness. So exercise a little open-mindedness, exercise a little open-heartedness, exercise a little willingness to see beyond first appearances, because I promise you, you're not seeing the whole story. Absolutely not seeing the whole story from an ego point of view. Because the ego couldn't possibly contain the whole story. That's not its function. You have to get beyond the conditioning of your ego to see the reality. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to observe your experience inwardly and outwardly, objectively. No judgment, no justifying, no rationalizing, no reframing, none of that. Just honest, objective observation. And see the multiple perspectives. Okay? And if all you get out of that exercise is that your head can't stay stuck in a negative pattern, a negative cycle of, regret or resentment or whatever the case might be, well, then you've helped to free yourself that much. And when you can see the false belief for what it is, it falls apart completely. And then a whole new circumstance or experience manifests in its place. I've done this many, many, many times. I know it works. Absolutely does work. And really, whether you're new on a path or been at it like I have for 35 plus years, this is an exercise that really doesn't get old. You're not going to outgrow it until you're fully in oneness consciousness. And then you still probably won't outgrow it. It'll just mean something different. So anyway, that's my thoughts for the moment. Hope you find this meaningful. If it struck a chord with you, if you have things that resonate, what's your experience of identifying, clarifying, and releasing negative beliefs? Love to hear about it in the comments. Hope you're having a fantastic day.